everybody, welcome back to my studio. This is Emma on a lovely day here in Cumbria. I hope you've had a good week. It seems no time at all since I was sitting here chatting to you last week and we were looking at doing a little landscape, a little bit of play with some colour and some fabrics, and this week I'm going to be showing you how I got on with that, with some stitching and some lovely threads that I've chosen to use. Moving it forward, just taking my time, no rush, no rush around here. I've had a very busy week myself because I've been clearing out a couple of rooms ready, and today we've got some builders in the house, and they're going to be doing some, I don't know, various things that builders do, making mess mostly. So we've kind of taken all our furniture out and moved things around and created a very sad looking pair of rooms, but I know when the builders are finished and we've got it all decorated, it's going to look fantastic. I've got rid of so much stuff though, would you believe? I keep getting rid of stuff and more stuff and more stuff. There was a cupboard yesterday that we were going to kind of hang on to and maybe reuse somewhere, but I looked at it last night and it's got woodworm, and so that's gone to the tip. Got rid of some chairs, sent some chairs to the charity shop, sent some cupboards to the charity shop, sent some chairs for recycling. There's a local sort of youth group that do upcycling of things, which is fantastic. So the young people get to do sort of basic upholstery and painting things and making things, and then they sell them. They've got a little shop and they sell them, and that makes me so happy. If I can send my stuff somewhere where it can be reused or recycled, that just feels so much better, doesn't it, than just, I don't like sending anything to the tip really, but sometimes things are, really, really gone. I had a couple of funny little armchairs that actually belonged to my grandparents. Oh, ancient things, and my husband and I have sat on them for years. They're just little upholstered bedroom chairs. Quite okay, but honestly, when I took the covers off them, I had these covers draped over them because I was always going to reupholster them but never got round to it. And took the covers off and thought these are disgusting, and one of them had woodworm, so I thought, right, that's it, they've really got to go. So big clear out up there, bit of a hoolie in my studio because I've got various things going on. I've got two workshops that I'm planning online. One of them's for the WOW books, which I mentioned last week, and I'm busy doing some samples for that. I've got some samples for another one for a workshop that I'm hoping to get up soon as. But meanwhile, life, has to be lived, and meals have to be made, and washing has to be done, and dishes have to be washed, and so on and so forth. And round here we've got animals to look after as well. So, it's all lovely, it's all life, and I'm so grateful to be where I am doing what I'm doing, and having you here with me makes it so much more interesting and exciting. So I will now get on and I'll show you, as I say, where I've got to with this little landscape, and we'll see how it progresses today. Okay, so there we go. I've pinned it all down round like that, pulled all the edges underneath like this. You can see on the back I've left enough overlap so they all fit around quite nicely, and then for these top bits I actually had to add an extra strip on because I changed my mind. That's how you go. Sometimes you change your mind and it's okay, because you're working with fabrics, you can do things like that. It's not like working with wood where, you can't just stick an extra leg on your table if you've already sawn them off, So there we go. I've decided this is what I'm going to do. I don't want it behind a mount, so I'm going to take it over to my sewing machine and just do some simple free machine embroidery onto it, and then I'm going to work out what's going to go on the top next. I've had a little bit of a play with some things, some ideas, but I'm just not quite sure, and I think I'll know better once I've got this stitched down and take these pins away and I can look at it and see what I fancy putting on it. So let's go to the sewing machine next. Okay, so my machine is here, set up for free machine embroidery. I've got my darning foot on, my embroidery foot here. I've lowered the feed dog teeth underneath so that the fabric can now run freely. I've put my stitch length onto 0 because I'm going to control that, and I usually reduce my top tension on my machine, but obviously your machine may not require that. So I've done a little bit here. I've actually machine embroidered this bit down, and all I've done is some simple wiggly lines across here in a toning thread, because I don't particularly want to have colour that's shouting and contrasting with these colours. I want this to be my background, and then whatever I put on top in the way of perhaps a seed head or two, that's what's going to give me the contrast. So what I always do is when I use one colour thread on one section, I bring it over into the next colour section. I don't know if you can see that there. So I've got the light coloured thread coming onto the slightly darker, and then when I do the darker colour thread, I'll put that over that side as well, and I feel that that sort of blends things in a little bit and makes it a bit more coherent. So I'm just going to do a little run of stitches down here. Sometimes you have to really hold these edges in place and keep them quite stiff while you're quite firmly hold them, so that they don't just pull out once you've taken the pin out. And once you've got it held in place, that's what I do with my edges. I simply come down to the edge and go back over. Sometimes I do a little drop down and, you know, it just gathers in the side here. It doesn't really matter. It's just going to make a little bit of a waggly edge for you. So I'm going to change the thread now and we'll get a darker colour, and I'm going to work my way down here. And I mean, the colours are lovely, aren't they, together? And we'll see where that takes me. Okay, so I've changed my top thread. I've got a slightly darker colour in to match this sort of, I don't know what colour you call this, mid sort of brown, and I'm going to go down here now. And I'm going to go as I say it. In fact, sometimes I turn it round because it's easier to see where I'm going. I turn it round, and also you can see what I'm doing better. There we go, just whiz it round again. I could be doing it side to side, but I find it easier just going up and down. It's very simple stitching. You don't even have to really do free machine embroidery with this, you know. Oh, do you know what? I think I've lost my underneath thread there. I think I need to put a new bobbin of thread underneath, so bear with, I'll be back in a moment. Okay, so I've got a new bobbin of thread underneath. Fancy running out in the middle of this, eh? You can see that pin out, and you can see that's kind of trying to push its way out. So I'm just going to hold that tight. Come up to the edge and sort of nip it in. You can do your edges a little bit more by just going forwards and backwards like this, and that just holds them in place, and then you can do your strips going across. I'm actually going to change threads again in a moment anyway, so let's just pull that one in a bit and get nip that one in, and I'm going to change threads again. Okay, so the next colour thread I've moved into is one that'll go. This has actually got two slightly different coloured fabrics on, but it doesn't matter. I've chosen something that's a mid-tone, and I'm just going to whiz down this side as well, and we'll just enjoy. I like this kind of stitching because it's very easy to do. There's nothing really riding on it. It's just to hold the fabrics in place and create a sense of texture. I think you can see it's already doing that, and you can see the difference in the fabric. I think this is quite puffy down at this end. This sort of bit here is quite puffy because it's just got the fabrics unstitched, and once you start to stitch it down you get a very different sort of feel to it, and it gives it this sort of sound quality which I rather like, and it means it can stand on its own. You know, it actually doesn't need to be framed when you've done something like this. You can just put a hook on it almost, and it would just stand up by itself. Anyway, let's just keep going. So now I'm just trying to choose which threads to use for the yellow. You see I've got a nice little line of the orange going along ready, starting off the yellow. It's quite nice because one colour sort of blends into the other when you do that. And I just think it makes it a little bit more interesting to do. So I think this one's a bit bright. This is what I do, is I take my thread and I just run it along and I look at it and I feel into it and I say, well, is that the colour I want? and something inside me goes yes, or it goes no, don't use that one. And sometimes it goes, oh yeah, that's amazing, go for that one. No, that one's too orangey. I think I'm going to stick, oh hang on, there's another one here. No, that's too dark. I think we're just going to go for this one because it's kind of neutrally yellow. And what I'm wanting really is not so much the colour of the thread to stand out for this, but it's what it's doing to the texture of the background. It's giving this nice sort of lined feel to it. And you could really be doing really deep furrows. I mean, you could do zigzag, I guess. You could do a zigzag, narrow zigzag along here as well. Perhaps I might do that down here, I don't know. And I haven't quite decided whether I'm going to do furrows going that way. But I think because the fabrics are going across my piece, I think I'm going to keep them going the same way. And perhaps do them a bit deeper. As I say, I could do zigzag stitch, or I could maybe go twice along one furrow and make it a bit stronger, so you get a sense of this being closer to you when you're sort of standing viewing it from here. So anyway, onward and upward, let's get this thread onto my machine and get the yellow stitch down. Okay, so I'm looking at colours again here, and I'm just wondering, I'm looking at this little strip along here with these sort of flowery splodges on, which I quite like because it kind of breaks up the solidness of the piece, because a lot of these other colours are quite solid. So I'm just debating whether I'm going to use one single colour for all of this brown bit down here, or whether I'm going to use different colours again. I mean, you could be using something, where have I got? Just bear with one moment. So my other thinking was whether I actually used a completely contrasting thread down here, perhaps a really light colour, or just a lighter, like an orange or a paler brown, but actually I don't think so. I think I still want it to be the same sort of toning colours, because then whatever I put on top in the foreground is going to really stand out. It's not really the landscape in this that's the standing out bit, if you know what I mean. The other thing I've got here, which I don't know if you can see very well, it's a thicker thread. So I was just debating whether I use that, but again, I think I'm just going to use the standard thread and let the stitching create the texture for me, which is what I'm always interested in. It's always the stitch for me, because it always changes the surface, and it's what it does to the surface and how it changes and makes it look that's what I really enjoy. So I think we're going to perhaps use a couple of browns so that we've got a sense of different shading coming down, and just get that bit of orange out of the way. And yeah, so that's what I'm going to do next, put the dark browns in and get this wizzed, and then I'll show you it when it's done. Okay, so that's my stitching finished. I've done it really simply, just going from side to side, because I didn't want to make the background too fussy, because what I'm hoping to do is put some seed heads on the front, and that'll make it a bit more interesting. And I want the seed heads to really stand out. I added a little bit more fabric across here, which you probably can't see, and a bit more top and bottom because I was a bit short. And this sort of coppery fabric has black in it, which I think I mentioned in my last video, so I actually needed to cover that black edge up because it was a bit too much. So I'll show you the back. There we go. You can see all the stitching, very simple. You don't even have to free machine it. You could just be using it with your normal presser foot on. I quite like the way these edges come in like this, and as I say, you pin those in, or you can actually embellish them in place from the top. If you fold them over, you can actually embellish them down, but you can see that's what I chose to do. I decided I was going to turn the edges in, so that's the answer to the question from last week. Sometimes I just embellish the edges and let them be rough and wild, but this time I just felt it just wanted to be edged like this, and you can see it's very wobbly, but I really like that. That's, you know, that's the nature of the game. So the next thing I was going to look at was some seed heads. Now obviously you could be planning this from the word go, and you could be drawing this out in your sketchbook or on your iPad or wherever you use to do any drawing, and you could be designing it before you even start. You could be, you know, thinking about exactly what you're going to put on and what size they're going to be and everything before you even start. Now what I tend to do is I tend to just let it evolve. I've evolved the back. I didn't quite know how this was going to turn out, so now I'm going to move on to the next stage and play around and see what happens. So I did do some little tiny sketches. They're just little wee ones, which I hope you can kind of see in my sketchbook, and it was just, that was the wool one that I did last time, And this was just playing around with whether I wanted to have poppies or some kind of, I don't know, like a big grass arrangement here, something very simple, whether I wanted to have some, I can't think what you call them, we used to call them cow parsley in my day. It's an umbel, officially it's an umbel, and again, whether you would have a single umbel or whether you'd have several, or whether I might do poppy seed heads. So that was just some ideas. I was just writing down a few ideas, which is quite helpful. I got these out again from last week. I just thought if you looked at the smaller ones of the shapes that I had from my wool landscape, but I really, they don't gel with me on this one. As I say, I did think about doing some little poppy seed heads, so I drew some out and I thought, well, that could be quite nice with I quite like that. That's a possibility. I also have these, which are very funny little things that I stitched a very long time ago. They're kind of little layered up. They're kind of seed heady. I don't know what they were really, flowers or seed heads, but they're quite useful again just when I'm looking for different shapes to put onto something. It's quite useful to have little things around like this that you just think, oh well, I'll just try that because that might be a shape that you might like to use. But actually no, they're not anything I want either. And I didn't know whether to do something in like a wool fabric or whether I want to be using more of this sort of satiny stuff. So this could be something for almost for making the poppy seed heads like this. And then again, it's a question of how many you have of anything, and then you're looking at what kind of stalks you're going to use. Now this isn't the wool that I would use for a stalk, but if you embellish, not embellish, but embellishing on the brain, if you zigzag stitched over that, that would be fine. I was just really using this because it's fairly straight and lets me look at stalk possibilities, like that. And I was again thinking about these blues, like I did on my wool landscape. I really thought this turquoisey colour is a really good colour as a contrast for the background, because if I try and do something in an autumnal colour, it'll just disappear. You know, if I used a brown up here, you'd then have a problem with the stalk. You'd have to do perhaps an orange stalk. It all gets a bit complicated. So I thought again I'll go for this really vibrant contrast and use some fabric accordingly. And I've got some wool, as you know from the last one I did. I could use something like that. I have lots of different things in my studio. I have to say I have baskets of all different kinds of colours and yarns. This is some linen thread, which is far too thin of course, but I was even trying this colour, which is cut a piece off here, look. It's not quite the right shade, but again it could be used and I can zigzag over that, and then that can be the stalk as well. So it's just a question of choosing. And I think, I'm not sure, 100% sure I'm going to do the poppy seed heads, but I will have a play and see where that takes me, and then you will find out next week what I actually chose to do, whether it's the poppy seed heads or whether another idea pops into my head. I was going to show you this. This is, if you take the wool, you can either take wool like this and lie it down and zigzag over it, and then it kind of flattens down into the landscape a little bit, or if you do something called making cord, you can run a piece of wool or string or whatever you're choosing to use. You can actually run that through your machine and you kind of pull it through and you let the machine do a zigzag across it, and this makes cord. If you've ever made that before, it's a very useful thing to know how to do actually. And again, that will, when you zigzag that down, it'll flatten down a little bit, but it will stand up more than if you just zigzag down a piece of wool like that. So that's this week's hot tip, ladies and gentlemen, for those of you who'd like a little hot tip. So there we go. I think that's as far as I can go today. I'm going to just finish filming now because I think it's nearly lunchtime. I do have to eat sometimes, although once I'm down in my studio, I'm probably not seen for days. So we'll see what happens next week. So thank you ever so much for watching. It's lovely to have you here on this interesting journey, and I will see you again next time. And we'll find out what's going to be the next thing.